Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Every night at 11 p.m. Emily Carter whispered, "I love you," to a sleeping millionaire who had been silent for 8 months, never knowing that those 3 words were the golden thread pulling Nathan Wells back from the edge of death. Sacred Heart Medical Center's private wing hummed with quiet efficiency as Emily stepped off the elevator, her heart already racing with anticipation. Room 314 had become her sanctuary, her purpose, her entire world condensed into sterile walls that somehow held the most beautiful story she'd ever known. Nathan Wells lay exactly as she'd left him 12 hours ago, perfectly still, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. 8 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days since the car accident that had stolen the city's most brilliant tech mogul from the world. But Emily saw beyond the coma, beyond the monitors, beyond the medical charts that labeled him a hopeless case. She saw the man who was fighting to come home. "Good evening, my sleeping prince," she whispered, her voice carrying warmth that could melt winter. The silly nickname had started as a joke, this mysterious millionaire who lay beautiful and unreachable, like something from a fairy tale. But now it felt like truth. Her nightly ritual began with religious devotion. First, the gentle examination, checking vitals, adjusting pillows, ensuring his comfort with touches that lingered longer than medically necessary. His heart rate always steadied when she arrived, as if his body recognized her presence, even in unconsciousness. The bath was her favorite part, the reason she'd specifically requested this assignment. Despite her supervisor's confusion, most nurses avoided long-term coma patients. Too depressing, they said, too hopeless. But Emily had felt inexplicably drawn to this man from the moment she'd seen his peaceful face. She warmed the water to perfection, adding lavender oil that she bought with her own money. Research suggested familiar scents could stimulate neural pathways, but for Emily, it was simpler. She wanted Nathan to feel cherished. "I brought vanilla body wash tonight," she said, testing the temperature, "something that smells like comfort instead of hospital antiseptic." Her hands began their careful work, washing away the day with infinite tenderness. His hands were beautiful, long fingers that had built an empire, palms that had touched the future through technology. She'd researched Nathan Wells obsessively, learning about the genius who'd revolutionized social media, who'd donated millions to medical research, who'd lost both parents young, and built his fortune as their legacy. The confession slipped out like a prayer. 3 years ago, her father had died in a similar bed after his heart attack. His final words haunted and healed her. "I heard you, sweetheart." Every word. That moment had shattered and rebuilt her, leading her to specialize in coma care, with unshakable faith that love could reach the deepest darkness. "You remind me of him," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Not in looks, but in presence. My dad made everyone feel safe, even when he needed protecting. You have that same energy." She moved to his chest, careful of the scars that told his trauma story. The accident had been brutal. Drunk driver, red light, concrete barrier, 4 minutes clinically dead before paramedics brought him back. But something had been left behind in that space between life and death. "I read about your company today," Emily said, working on his shoulders. "How you built it from nothing after your parents died. You were only 22, but you revolutionized how people connect. Maybe that's why you understand connection, even now, even asleep." Fresh pajamas came next, soft cotton in deep blue that brought out the color she imagined his eyes would be. She'd learned his preferences through magazine articles and interviews, jazz music, poetry, vintage books. This was a man who appreciated beauty. "I brought your favorite tonight," she said, activating the small speaker she'd placed on his nightstand. Bill Evans' "Waltz for Debbie" filled the room, soft and haunting. "Maybe when you wake up, you can play for me. I'd love to hear you make music." But their evening wasn't complete without reading. She'd started with business journals, thinking company news might stimulate his brain. But one night, impulsively, she'd read him a love poem, and his heart rate had increased dramatically. Now poetry was their language. "Tonight, we're reading Pablo Neruda," she said, pulling her chair close and taking his hand. 20 love poems and a song of despair. I think you have a romantic soul hiding under all that genius." Their fingers intertwined as if they'd done this dance forever. His skin was warm, his hand fitting perfectly in hers. Sometimes, though she'd never told anyone, she swore she felt him squeeze back. "I love you without knowing how, or when, or from where." She read, her voice catching, "I love you simply, without problems or pride." The words felt like confession. Somewhere in these endless nights, Emily had fallen in love with Nathan Wells, not the millionaire or CEO, but the soul she felt stirring beneath stillness, the man who existed in the space between heartbeats. "I know it's impossible," she whispered, closing the book and leaning closer. "I know you probably can't hear me, and even if you could, I'm just your nurse. But, Nathan, I need you to know you're not alone. Someone loves you. Someone believes in you. Someone is waiting for you to come home." The monitors maintained their steady rhythm as Emily settled in for the long watch. She would stay until dawn, holding his hand and whispering prayers to whatever force might be listening. She had no idea that, in the deepest chambers of his sleeping mind, Nathan Wells was indeed listening, and that her voice had become the silver thread he followed night after night, trying to find his way back to the world. Back to life. Back to her. Chapter 2. The Sound of Miracles. At 6:47 a.m. On a Tuesday that shattered every medical textbook, Nathan Wells's first word in 8 months wasn't help or water. It was Emily, whispered like a prayer finally answered. Dawn painted Sacred Heart Medical Center in rose and gold. As Emily began her morning routine, she had dozed in the chair beside Nathan's bed, her hand still entwined with his, dreams filled with poetry and the rhythm of his breathing. The hospital stirred to life around them. Breakfast carts, day shift arriving, life returning to the corridors. But room 314 existed in its own peaceful bubble, where miracles felt both impossible and inevitable. "Good morning, my sleeping prince," Emily whispered, squeezing his hand gently. "Did you dream of waking up?" She prepared the morning bath with sacred precision. Warm water, lavender oil, the same tender ritual that had become their shared language. Her voice carried a wordless melody her mother used to sing, something ancient that spoke of love and healing. "Perfect weather today," she said, testing water temperature. "Maybe later I'll ask Lily if we can visit the sunroom. You always seem more peaceful in natural light." She began with his face, her touch feather-light as she washed away the night. His features were aristocratic, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, dark lashes resting like silk against his cheeks. She had memorized every line, every shadow. "I've been thinking about when you wake up," she continued, the cloth moving across his forehead. "Evan says you love to travel. Maybe somewhere peaceful first. A beach where you can feel sun on your face, and remember what it means to be alive." The humming returned as she worked, that wordless lullaby flowing from her heart without conscious thought. It spoke of safety and love, and the promise that darkness always gives way to light. The melody floated through the room like morning mist. "My grandmother said music was the language of the soul. Maybe yours can hear mine calling." She moved to his shoulders, hands working with practiced ease. But there was nothing routine about the electricity that danced between her fingertips and his skin. Nothing ordinary about the way her heart raced at his touch. "I read something interesting yesterday," she said conversationally. "Coma patients who hear familiar voices show increased brain activity in memory and emotion centers. I like thinking that means you're listening, storing up these conversations for when you're ready to join them." The humming continued, melody weaving through words like golden thread through fabric. It was then, as her hands moved across his chest and her voice carried that ancient tune, that something shifted. His breathing changed, becoming less automatic and more conscious. His eyelids fluttered with sudden purpose. "Nathan," Emily's humming stopped abruptly. His face, peaceful but vacant for so long, seemed to be searching. "Nathan, can you hear me?" And then, like sun breaking through storm clouds, it happened. "Emily." Her name whispered so softly it might have been breath itself. But it was clear, real, directed at her with the precision of a heart finding home. The washcloth slipped from trembling fingers, landing with a splash that echoed like thunder in sudden silence. Her eyes, wide with disbelief and dawning joy, searched his face as if seeing it for the first time. "Emily," he said again, voice stronger now, rough from disuse, but unmistakably intentional. His eyelids fluttered once, twice, then opened to reveal eyes the color of deep ocean water, storm gray with flecks of blue that held the wisdom of someone who had traveled to existence's edge and found his way back. "Oh my God," Emily breathed, hands flying to her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Nathan, you're awake. You said my name." She reached for the call button with shaking fingers, eyes never leaving his face. He blinked slowly, adjusting to light after long darkness, his gaze moving around the room with confusion before settling on her with laser focus. "Emily," he repeated, and this time it sounded like recognition, like greeting, like coming home. "I'm here," she whispered, leaning closer so he could see her clearly. "I'm right here, Nathan. You're safe. You're back." Nathan tried to lift his hand toward her face, the simple movement requiring enormous effort. His fingers trembled as they found her cheek, and when they made contact, his eyes filled with wonder. "You're real," he whispered, voice cracking with emotion. "I thought, in the darkness, I wasn't sure if you were real or if I was dreaming you." "I'm real," Emily laughed through her tears, covering his hand with hers. "Nathan, you've been in a coma for 8 months. You were in a car accident, but you're going to be okay. You're going to be more than okay. Doctor." Clara Hughes burst through the door, hair disheveled from sleep, eyes bright with professional alertness. Behind her came Sophie Grant and another day shift nurse, their faces reflecting the excitement and disbelief that accompanied medical miracles. "What happened, Doctor?" Hughes asked, moving immediately to Nathan's bedside and pulling out her pen light. "The call said he was conscious." "He said my name," Emily said, stepping back to give the doctor room but keeping her hand extended toward Nathan. "3 times, he looked right at me and said my name, and he touched my face. He knew I was real. Doctor." Hughes's examination was swift but thorough, checking his pupil's response to light, testing his reflexes, monitoring his heart rate and blood pressure. Every reading was not just normal, but better than normal. "Nathan, can you tell me your name?" "Doctor," Hughes asked, her professional calm barely concealing her amazement. "Nathan," he replied, then paused, concentrating. "Nathan Wells." His eyes drifted back to Emily between each medical test, as if she were his anchor to consciousness. "Do you know where you are?" "Hospital." He struggled to sit up slightly, wincing with the effort. "Sacred Heart Medical Center, room 314. Doctor." Hughes's eyebrows shot up. "You remember your room number?" "I remember her voice," Nathan said. Eyes, finding Emily again. Every night, she would tell me about room 314, about the flowers on the windowsill and the way the morning light comes through the blinds. She made this place feel like home. Emily felt her knees go weak. He had been listening. He had heard everything. "Do you remember what happened to you?" "Doctor." Hughes continued. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowing with concentration. "Car accident. I was driving home from the office, late, around 11 p.m. There was music playing The Way You Look Tonight by Sinatra. It was raining, and the streets were slick with reflections." His voice grew stronger as the memories returned. "I was thinking about my life, about being alone. Then there was another car, drunk driver, red light. The impact." He paused, touching his chest, where the scars from surgery were hidden beneath his hospital gown. "I died," he said quietly, the words falling into the room like stones into still water. "I remember dying. Everything went black, and I was falling into this gray place. But then, his eyes found Emily again. Then I heard her voice calling me back. The room was completely silent except for the steady beeping of monitors. Doctor." Hughes stared at Nathan with undisguised amazement. "This is extraordinary," she murmured, making rapid notes on his chart. "After 8 months, coma patients usually need weeks to regain this level of cognitive function. Your memory is not just intact, it's enhanced. You're remembering details that most trauma patients lose forever." Dr. Sophie Grant whispered from the doorway. The entire 4th floor heard the commotion. Word is spreading through the hospital like wildfire. The nurses who have been caring for him, they're all gathering in the hallway. They want to see the miracle. Through the open door, they could hear the excited voices of hospital staff, the word miracle being whispered over and over again. "How do you feel, Nathan?" Dr. Hughes asked. "Physically, I mean." Nathan considered this, moving his arms experimentally, flexing his fingers. "Weak," he admitted. "Like I've been asleep for a very long time, but also alive. More alive than I felt in years. There's this clarity, like everything that mattered before the accident was just noise. And now I can hear what's really important." He struggled to sit up further, determination overriding physical weakness. "I want to see her properly," he said, eyes never leaving Emily's face. 8 months of listening to her voice, and I want to really see the angel who brought me back." Emily moved closer, taking his hand in both of hers. In the better light, she could see that his eyes weren't just storm gray. They were alive with intelligence and depth, and something that looked remarkably like love. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his voice carrying the wonder of someone seeing sunlight after a long winter. "I imagined what you might look like. But the reality is so much better than any dream." The door burst open again as Lucas Hayes stumbled in, still in yesterday's clothes, hair wild from sleep and worry. He had been contacted immediately and had broken several traffic laws getting to the hospital. "Nathan," Lucas's voice broke on his best friend's name. 8 months of grief and hope colliding in that single word. "Holy, you're really awake. You're really back." "Language, Lucas," Nathan smiled weakly. But the expression transformed his entire face, bringing warmth and humor back to features that had been peaceful but empty for so long. "There's a lady present." Lucas's laugh was half-sob as he approached the bed, his usually composed businessman demeanor cracking completely. 8 months, men. 8 months I've been talking to your unconscious ass, telling you about board meetings and quarterly reports, and the first thing you do is correct my language. "I heard you," Nathan said simply, reaching out with his free hand to grasp his best friend's arm. "I heard every word, the company updates, the financial reports, your terrible jokes about hospital food. You kept my world alive when I couldn't live in it myself." Lucas's eyes filled with tears as he squeezed Nathan's hand. "I never gave up hope, but there were days, God, Nathan. There were days when I thought we'd lost you forever. But mostly I heard her," Nathan continued, his gaze returning to Emily like a compass finding north. "Your voice was my anchor, Emily. In all that gray nothingness, you were my light guiding me home." Lily Parker appeared in the doorway, her professional composure barely containing her excitement. "Mr. Wells," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "the entire nursing staff is asking permission to see you. Some of these women have been caring for you for months. They need to see that their work, their faith, their prayers, they need to see that it all mattered." Nathan looked around the room at the gathered faces. Dr. Hughes with her scientific amazement, Sophie with her tearful joy, Lucas with his overwhelming relief, and Emily with her luminous love. "Let them come," he said softly. "Let them see that miracles are real." Over the next hour, a steady stream of hospital staff filed through room 314, nurses who had turned him every 2 hours to prevent bed sores, respiratory therapists who had kept his lungs clear, physical therapists who had moved his limbs to prevent atrophy. Each one touched his hand, whispered a welcome back, and left with tears in their eyes. But through it all, Nathan's attention remained focused on Emily. As the excitement died down and the medical team busied themselves with updated charts and procedures, he caught her hand and pulled her closer. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice meant for her alone. "For believing I would come back, for never giving up on me, for loving me when I couldn't love you back." "I couldn't give up," she whispered in return, her heart soaring as his thumb brushed across her knuckles in a gesture that was becoming familiar. "Something told me you were just lost, not gone. I'm so glad I was right." "There's something else," Nathan said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "In the coma, I could feel your love. Not just hear your voice, but feel the emotion behind it. Every time you held my hand or touched my face or just sat beside me, I felt this warmth spreading through the darkness. Your love was literally keeping me alive. Dr. Hughes, overhearing this, paused in her note-taking. From a medical standpoint, that's not impossible, she said quietly. Touch therapy, emotional connection, the power of human bond. We're discovering that these things have measurable effects on recovery. But what you're describing, it's the most powerful example I've ever witnessed. What happens now? Emily asked. Suddenly aware that this perfect moment would have to give way to medical reality. Now we run every test in the book, Dr. Hughes said with a smile. But, Nathan, I want you to know, in 30 years of practicing medicine, I've never seen anything like this. You're not just recovered, you're enhanced. Your cognitive function is testing above normal ranges. It's as if the coma didn't just heal your body, it clarified your mind. Love does that, Nathan said simply, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. It strips away everything that doesn't matter and shows you what's truly important. As the medical team prepared for the battery of tests that would follow, as Lucas made phone calls to share the miraculous news, as word spread through the hospital and beyond that the impossible had happened, Nathan and Emily remained connected by their intertwined hands and the unbreakable bond that had formed in the darkness. The miracle of his awakening would be discussed in medical journals and case studies for years to come. But in that moment, all that mattered was the connection between a woman who had loved a sleeping stranger back to life and the man who had followed her voice home from the land of the lost. I love you, Nathan whispered, the words falling between them like a benediction. I know it's too soon to say that, and I know the situation is complicated. But, Emily, I love you. I loved your voice before I could see your face. And now that I can see you, now that I can touch you, now that I can tell you, I love you with everything I am. Emily felt her world realign around those words. Felt every hope and dream she had whispered in the darkness suddenly become real. I love you too, she whispered back. I've loved you since that first night when you were just a sleeping stranger who somehow felt like coming home. And in room 314 of Sacred Heart Medical Center, as morning sunlight streamed through windows and painted everything in gold, two hearts that had found each other across the space between life and death began the greatest love story the world had ever known. Chapter 3. Learning to Live Again. Nathan Wells had conquered Silicon Valley and built an empire worth billions. But the most challenging project of his life turned out to be walking 10 steps to the woman who had become his entire world. 3 days after his awakening, Nathan sat in Sacred Heart's rehabilitation wing, watching Emily organize equipment with the precision of a general preparing for battle. The private room offered floor-to-ceiling windows and a city skyline he had helped build, but his eyes never left her face. Ready for another adventure? Emily asked, wheeling over an exercise bike. Her smile could power the entire hospital. Today we see if your legs remember how to pedal. Nathan felt his heart rate spike, not from anxiety about the exercise, but from the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about his progress. Every day brought new discoveries about his angel, and each revelation made him fall deeper. Before the accident, I ran 5 miles every morning, he said, voice still carrying traces of roughness. Now I get winded sitting up. Muscles have memory, Emily replied, adjusting resistance to its lowest setting. Your body remembers being strong. We just have to remind it how. She moved around him with practiced efficiency, but Nathan had learned to read the subtle signs that betrayed her professional composure. The way her touch lingered when checking his pulse, the soft intake of breath when their eyes met, the gentle tremor in her hands when she helped him move. Tell me something about yourself, Nathan said as she guided his feet to the pedals. Something that has nothing to do with nursing or taking care of broken millionaires. Broken? Emily laughed. The sound like wind chimes. You're not broken, Nathan Wells. You're healing. Stop deflecting and answer the question. She positioned herself beside the bike, ready to steady him. I wanted to be a dancer when I was little. Ballet. I spent weekends at Miss Catherine's School of Dance, dreaming of Lincoln Center. What happened? Nathan asked, beginning to pedal slowly. Life, Emily said simply. My dad got sick when I was 16. Hospitals became my second home, and I fell in love with the nurses who cared for him. They brought light into dark places. I decided I wanted to be that light for others. Nathan stopped pedaling, studying her face with new understanding. That's why you're so good at this. It's not just a job. Nothing about what I feel for you is just a job, she said quietly, then blushed furiously. I mean, I know what you mean, Nathan said softly, reaching for her hand. And I feel it, too. The moment stretched between them, electric and fragile, until Dr. Clara Hughes knocked and entered. How's our miracle patient? She asked, reviewing Nathan's chart. Yesterday's brain scans are remarkable. No cognitive impairment and motor functions recovering faster than we dared hope. I have excellent motivation, Nathan said, eyes never leaving Emily's face. After the doctor left, Emily helped Nathan transition to parallel bars for walking practice. This was the moment he both anticipated and dreaded, when his weakness would be most apparent, when the distance between who he had been and who he was now would be impossible to ignore. Take your time, Emily said, positioning herself at the end like a lighthouse guiding him home. Focus on me. Nathan gripped the bars, knuckles white with effort and determination. The first step was agony, legs shaking, muscles screaming after months of disuse. But Emily's face, radiant with encouragement and something deeper, kept him moving forward. That's it, she whispered, voice thick with emotion. One step at a time. You're doing beautifully. By the fourth step, Nathan was breathing hard, sweat beading on his forehead. By the seventh, his vision blurred with exhaustion. But on the eighth step, something magical happened. His body remembered strength, remembered balance, remembered the joy of movement. Emily, he said, voice breaking with wonder. I'm actually walking. You're walking to me, she confirmed, tears streaming down her cheeks. The final two steps felt like flying. When he reached the end, Emily was there to catch him, her arms wrapping around him as he swayed with exhaustion and triumph. For a moment that lasted forever, they held each other. His face buried in her hair, her heart beating against his chest. I've got you, she whispered into his shoulder. I've always got you. Nathan pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, hands framing her face with trembling fingers. How did I get so lucky? How did I end up with an angel for a nurse? Maybe we were meant to find each other this way, Emily said softly. Maybe everything good and terrible led us to this moment. The afternoon brought more exercises, more small victories, more moments when their professional relationship blurred into something deeper. Nathan learned that Emily had a sister named Ava studying art therapy, that she made terrible coffee but amazing cookies, that she sang in her car and cried during sad movies. What about you? Emily asked as she helped him through arm exercises. Tell me something, not in the business magazines. Nathan considered this, arms working against resistance bands. I play piano, jazz mostly. My mother taught me before she died. I knew it, Emily exclaimed. I could tell by your hands. They're musicians' hands. I used to compose when I was stressed, my way of processing emotions I couldn't express. What was the last song you composed? The question hit unexpectedly, bringing vivid memory. The night before the accident, he said quietly, I'd had a terrible fight with someone I thought I loved. I spent hours at the piano trying to make sense of it all. Emily waited patiently. Her name was Rachel, Nathan continued, voice strengthening. We were married, but it was toxic. She wanted my money, my status, not me. The night of the accident, she told me she'd been having an affair, that she was leaving and taking half of everything. I'm sorry, Emily said simply, hand-finding his. It was devastating then, Nathan admitted. But lying here these past months, listening to your voice, feeling your care, I realized what I had with Rachel wasn't love. It was just two people using each other. What makes you say that? Nathan turned to face her fully, eyes serious and intent. Because now I know what love feels like. Love doesn't take, Emily. Love gives. Love heals. Love brings you back from the dead. The confession hung in the air between them, precious and terrifying. Emily felt her heart stop and restart, felt the world tilt as everything she had hoped, but never dared believe, suddenly became real. Nathan, she whispered. I know it's crazy, he said quickly. I know I'm your patient. This is complicated, and I'm still married to someone who doesn't deserve the title. But, Emily, what I feel for you is exactly what I feel for you, she finished, smile breaking through like sunrise. I love you, too, Nathan. I've loved you since that first night when you were just a sleeping stranger who somehow felt like coming home. When their lips met, it was soft and tentative at first, a question asked and answered in the space of a heartbeat. But then Nathan's hand tangled in her hair, and Emily's arms wrapped around his neck, and the kiss deepened into something that spoke of promises and futures and love that could conquer even death. They broke apart, breathless, foreheads touching, both amazed by the magnitude of what they had just acknowledged. "What happens now?" Emily asked, voice shaky with emotion and possibility. "Now," Nathan said, thumb tracing her cheek, "we figure out how to build a life together, one step at a time." Outside the window, the city sparkled in afternoon sun, a world full of possibility, waiting for two hearts brave enough to claim their miracle. Chapter 4. Colors of the Heart. The moment Nathan Wells saw his first sunset in 8 months, he realized he had been living in black and white his entire life until Emily Carter painted his world in colors that didn't exist before love. "I need to get out of this room," Nathan announced Friday evening, restless energy radiating from every muscle. His recovery was miraculous, each day bringing increased mobility and growing frustration with medical confinement. Emily looked up from her charts, studying the determination in his eyes. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "There's a garden here. Actual grass, actual sky, actual fresh air. That doesn't smell like antiseptic." His grin was becoming dangerously irresistible. "And technically, you're my primary nurse. Doesn't that give you discretionary power? Are you trying to manipulate me, Mr. Wells?" "Absolutely," he replied without hesitation. "Is it working?" Nathan looked better than he had since awakening. Color in his cheeks, eyes bright and alert, muscle tone improving daily. More importantly, confinement was affecting his mental state, and Emily knew emotional healing was crucial. "Fine," she said, throwing up her hands. "But we're taking a wheelchair, and at the first sign of fatigue, we're coming back." "Deal," Nathan agreed immediately, smile brilliant enough to power the hospital. 20 minutes later, Emily pushed Nathan through corridors toward the healing garden, their path lit by golden afternoon sun. Nathan clutched a mysterious bag from the hospital gift shop, refusing to explain despite Emily's curiosity. "Close your eyes," he said as they approached the garden entrance. "Nathan, I'm pushing the wheelchair." "Trust me," he said, voice soft with anticipation. "Please." Something in his tone made her comply, slowing considerably as they passed through automatic doors. Evening air hit them like a gentle caress, carrying jasmine and freshly cut grass. "Okay," Nathan said, voice thick with emotion. "Open them." Emily opened her eyes to find Nathan staring at the garden with absolute wonder. His hands gripped the armrests, entire body leaning forward as if he could drink in the sight. "Nathan," she asked softly, "are you all right?" "The colors," he whispered, voice breaking. "Oh God, Emily, look at the colors." She followed his gaze. The healing garden in evening glory, rose bushes heavy with coral, crimson and blush blooms, lavender swaying gently, purple spikes catching light like amethyst, golden marigolds and white jasmine, creating a tapestry that glowed in setting sun. "It's beautiful," she agreed, watching his face more than the garden. "No, you don't understand," Nathan said, turning to her with tears in his eyes. "In the coma, everything was gray, shadows and mist and endless twilight. Even after I woke, it was like someone had turned down saturation on the world. But this," he gestured helplessly, "it's like seeing for the first time." Emily felt her heart constrict. She moved around to face him, kneeling beside his wheelchair. "Maybe," she said softly, "you needed to come back to life completely before you could really see again." Nathan reached out to touch her face, thumb tracing her cheek with infinite tenderness. "Maybe I needed you to show me what life could look like." They stayed like that while the garden bloomed around them in spectacular silence. Finally, Nathan cleared his throat and reached for his mysterious bag. "I have something for you," he said, suddenly nervous. "The gift shop selection is limited, but I wanted to give you something beautiful." From the bag, he pulled a small potted orchid, delicate white petals with deep purple centers that seemed to glow in evening light. Elegant and exotic, completely different from practical gifts. Most people might choose. "Nathan," Emily breathed, accepting the plant reverently. It's gorgeous. But you didn't need to. Yes, I did, he interrupted gently. Emily, you've given me everything. My life, my sanity, my heart. The least I can do is give you flowers. She cradled the orchid against her chest. I love it, but more than that, I love that you thought of me. I think of you constantly, Nathan admitted, voice rough with honesty. Every breath, every heartbeat, every conscious moment, you're there. Emily set the orchid on a nearby bench and returned to his side. Tell me what you're thinking about when you think of me. Nathan was quiet, organizing thoughts too big for words. I think about how you hum without realizing it, how your hands are magic. They ease pain and bring comfort and make me feel safe in a way I've never experienced. How you see people, really see them, not their bank accounts or reputations. What else? Emily asked, voice barely above a whisper. I think about traveling with you, Nathan continued, eyes growing distant with possibility. Showing you places I've been, but never experienced because I was always working. I want to take you to lavender fields in Provence, where purple is so intense it looks like spilled paint. I want to watch sunrise over Angkor Wat and see if it's more beautiful than how you look when you sleep in that chair. Emily felt tears gathering. I've never been anywhere. The farthest I've traveled is 2 states over for a nursing conference. Then we'll paint the world together, Nathan said simply. Real paintings, not just words. We'll go everywhere and make memories that will last lifetimes. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in rose gold and deep orange that reflected in Nathan's eyes like fire. Other visitors moved through the garden, but Emily and Nathan existed in their own private universe. Can I tell you something? Nathan asked as stars began to appear. Anything. During the coma, I had dreams. Not usual dreams. These were different, more real. He paused, searching for words. I was in this gray place, like being underwater, but able to breathe. Everything was muffled and distant except one thing. What was that? Your voice, he said, eyes finding hers in twilight. It was like a golden thread running through darkness. Every night, I would follow that thread, trying to find my way back to consciousness, back to you. You were my lighthouse, Emily. You guided me home. The confession hung between them, precious and fragile in evening air. Emily felt her heart swell with emotion so intense it was almost painful. Nathan, she whispered, leaning closer. I know this is crazy, he said quickly. I know we barely know each other conventionally, and the situation is complicated. But Emily silenced him by placing her finger gently against his lips. It's not crazy. It's the most sane thing I've ever heard. She leaned closer, drawn by a magnetic pull that had existed between them since that first morning. Nathan's hand tangled in her hair, pulling her closer until their breath mingled. Emily, there you are. They sprang apart as Sophie Grant appeared around a corner, face bright with excitement. She stopped short when she saw their positions, eyebrows climbing. Oh, Sophie said, a knowing smile spreading. Am I interrupting something? No, Emily said quickly, cheeks burning. We were just enjoying the garden. Uh-huh, Sophie replied, clearly not buying it. Well, enjoy away. Lily Parker is looking for you about next week's scheduling. As Sophie disappeared, Emily and Nathan sat in charged silence, the moment broken, but electricity stronger than ever. We should probably head back, Emily said reluctantly. Probably, Nathan agreed, though neither moved. Thank you, Emily said, gesturing to the orchid and the magical evening. For reminding me there's beauty in the world. Thank you, Nathan replied, for showing me what love looks like. As they made their way back, both knew something fundamental had shifted. The garden had been more than escape. It had been a promise of the life they could build together, painted in colors that only existed when two hearts found their perfect match. Chapter 5. The Night Everything Changed. When the lights went out at Sacred Heart Medical Center at 11:47 p.m., Emily Carter had no idea that dancing shadows and candlelight would become the backdrop for the most passionate night of her life. The power outage struck without warning, plunging Sacred Heart into eerie, quiet, broken only by emergency generators, humming to life. Emily was finishing evening rounds when lights flickered once, twice, then died, leaving corridors bathed in soft battery-powered emergency lighting. She hurried toward Nathan's room, heart racing. He'd been having nightmares lately, fragmented accident memories that jolted him awake in cold sweats. The darkness would only make it worse. "Nathan," she called softly, pushing open his door to find the room illuminated only by pale green monitor glow and silver moonlight streaming through windows. "I'm here," came his voice from darkness, tight with tension. "What happened?" "Power outage," Emily explained, feeling her way to the emergency cabinet. "Probably a transformer in the storm. Generators will keep essential systems running, but we'll be in the dark for a while." She found what she needed: battery-powered lanterns and candles, for exactly this emergency. As she lit the first candle, warm golden light bloomed, casting dancing shadows and transforming the sterile space into something magical and intimate. "Better?" she asked, setting the candle on his bedside table. "Much," Nathan replied, but she could hear underlying anxiety. Could you stay? I know your shift is over, but—" "Of course," Emily said without hesitation, settling into her familiar chair. "I'm not leaving you alone in the dark." She lit 2 more candles, placing them around the room until the space glowed with soft, flickering light. The effect was breathtaking. Harsh medical equipment faded into shadow, while warm light highlighted Nathan's face like a Renaissance painting. "Tell me about the nightmares," Emily said gently, pulling her chair closer. "Dr. Hughes says they're normal, but that doesn't make them less frightening." Nathan was quiet, hands restless against white sheets. "It's always the same," he said finally. "I'm driving home, and the way you look tonight is playing." It was raining, streets slick with neon reflections. I remember thinking how beautiful the city looked. Emily reached out to take his hand, fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become natural as breathing. "Then I see the other car," Nathan continued, voice growing rough. "Time slows down. And I know what's going to happen, but I can't stop it. The impact, the spinning, everything going black. Except in the nightmare, I don't wake up. I'm trapped in darkness forever, and no one comes to find me." "But someone did find you," Emily said softly. "I found you, and I brought you home." Nathan turned to look at her in candlelight, eyes reflecting golden flames like stars. "How did you know? How did you know I was still in there?" Emily felt her heart race as they approached territory they had been circling. The truth about what had driven her to care for him with such devotion. "Because I fell in love with you," she whispered, confession slipping out like a prayer. "Not the millionaire or CEO, but the man who existed in the space between heartbeats. I fell in love with your peaceful face and gentle hands, and the way you seemed to be listening, even when you couldn't respond." Nathan's breath caught audibly in intimate darkness. "Emily, I used to tell you everything," she continued, voice growing stronger. "About my day, my dreams, places I wanted to travel, and the life I wanted to build. I told you about my father and how losing him taught me that love doesn't end just because someone can't answer back. I told you I believed in miracles, and that I was waiting for you to come home to me." "I remember," Nathan said, voice thick with emotion. "Every word, every story, every moment you spent beside me. Your voice was the only real thing in all that gray nothingness." Candlelight flickered between them, creating an intimate world where only truth could exist. Emily felt 8 months of suppressed emotion rising like a tide. "I used to imagine what it would be like when you woke up," she confessed. "I pictured you opening your eyes and seeing me. Really seeing me. And knowing somehow that we belonged together." "It's exactly what happened," Nathan interrupted, free hand reaching up to cup her face. "The moment I opened my eyes and saw you, I knew I was home. Not because of the hospital or medical care, but because you were there." Emily felt tears gathering as she leaned into his touch. "I was so scared that when you recovered, when you remembered your real life, you would forget about the night nurse who talked too much and dreamed too big." "Forget you?" Nathan's voice was incredulous. "Emily, you are my real life. Everything that came before was just marking time until I found you." The confession hung in the air, precious and fragile in dancing candlelight. Nathan's thumb traced her cheek, wiping away tears she didn't realize had fallen. "I need to tell you something else," he said, voice dropping to a whisper. "During the coma, I could feel when you touched me. Not physically, but spiritually. Every time you held my hand or smoothed my hair or rested your palm against my chest, I felt warmth spreading through the darkness. You were healing me from the inside out. Emily's breath caught. You could feel me? I could feel your love, Nathan corrected softly. It was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Even when I couldn't respond, couldn't move or speak, or give you any sign, your love was keeping me alive. The revelation broke something open in Emily's chest, releasing 8 months of fear and hope and desperate love. She leaned forward until their foreheads touched. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you so much it terrifies me. Don't be terrified, Nathan murmured, hand tangling in her hair. Be brave. Be brave enough to let me love you back. When their lips met, it was nothing like their hesitant first kiss. This was fire and starlight, and 8 months of longing condensed into a single perfect moment. Nathan kissed her like she was oxygen, and he had been drowning, like she was music, and he had been deaf to beauty his entire life. Emily melted into him, hands fisting in his pajama shirt, as she poured every unspoken word, every midnight confession, every desperate prayer into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, faces illuminated by candlelight and the glow of something that transcended the physical world. Stay with me tonight, Nathan whispered, forehead still pressed against hers. Not as my nurse, not because it's your job, but because I can't bear another night without you beside me. Nathan, I shouldn't. Please, he interrupted, voice raw with need. We don't have to do anything but talk and hold each other. I just need you close. I need to know this is real. Emily looked into his eyes, seeing not just desire, but vulnerability and hope and love, so pure it took her breath away. Okay, she whispered. Yes. Nathan shifted carefully to one side of the narrow bed, wincing as his healing body protested. Emily slipped under the covers beside him, her body fitting perfectly against his, as if they had been designed to occupy the same space. For a long moment, they simply held each other in candlelit darkness, marveling at skin against skin, heartbeat against heartbeat, breath mingling between them. They talked through the night as candles burned low, sharing stories and secrets and plans for a future that felt both impossible and inevitable. Nathan told her about the loneliness of being successful but empty. Emily shared her dreams of making a difference, of using her gift for healing to help people find hope. As dawn approached, painting the room in rose and gold, they both knew something fundamental had shifted. They were no longer patient and caregiver. They were soulmates who had found each other across the space between life and death. Whatever happens next, Nathan whispered as sunlight began to chase away candlelight, I want you to know that you saved me. Not just medically, but in every way a person can be saved. You saved me too, Emily replied, fingers tracing patterns on his chest. You showed me what it means to love someone completely. The power came back on with a sudden hum, but neither moved to extinguish the candles. Some kinds of light were too precious to waste, some moments too perfect to end. In room 314, two hearts that had found their perfect match settled into peaceful sleep, surrounded by dying candlelight that had witnessed the birth of forever. Chapter 6. The Ghost Returns. Rachel Vaughn walked into Sacred Heart Medical Center, wearing designer heels that clicked like gunshots on marble floors, carrying legal documents that could shatter a love story 8 months in the making, and wielding a smile sharp enough to cut through every dream built in darkness. The morning after the most perfect night of Emily's life began with what should have been routine, helping Nathan with physical therapy while they both tried to hide that their world had shifted on its axis. The candlelight was gone, replaced by harsh fluorescence. But intimacy remained, crackling in every glance and touch. You're glowing, Sophie observed, entering with Nathan's breakfast tray, knowing smiles suggesting she suspected exactly why her best friend looked like she'd swallowed starlight. Either you've discovered amazing skincare, or something very interesting happened during the power outage. Emily felt heat rise in her cheeks as she helped Nathan settle against his pillows. The power came back around 6 o'clock. She said, failing at professional detachment. Uh-huh, Sophie replied, setting down the tray with exaggerated care. I'm sure you spent those 7 hours discussing medical protocols. Nathan caught Emily's hand, fingers intertwining in a gesture becoming natural as breathing. Actually, he said, eyes never leaving Emily's face. We talked about the future. The moment was shattered by commotion in the hallway. Raised voices, sharp tap of expensive heels, and Lily Parker's diplomatic but firm tones, managing an increasingly volatile situation. "I don't care what your visiting policies are." A woman's voice cut through morning quiet like a blade. "I am his wife, which gives me legal rights that supersede your hospital bureaucracy." Emily felt blood drain from her face as the words registered. "Wife?" The room tilted sideways as she looked at Nathan, whose expression had gone from contentment to horror. "Nathan," Emily whispered, voice barely audible. "What is she talking about?" Before he could answer, the door burst open to reveal a woman from a fashion magazine. Blonde hair in perfect waves, designer suit worth more than Emily made in 6 months, and eyes like winter ice that swept the room with predatory assessment. "Hello, darling," Rachel Vaughn said, voice dripping false sweetness as she focused on Nathan. "Miss me?" The silence was deafening. Emily felt like she was watching from outside her body, unable to process the nightmare destroying everything beautiful about the morning. "Rachel," Nathan said, voice flat and cold in a way Emily had never heard. "What are you doing here?" "Visiting my husband, of course," Rachel replied, smile sharpening as she noticed Emily's white face and Nathan's protective grip on her hand. "I heard about your miraculous recovery and simply had to see for myself." "Ex-husband," Nathan corrected firmly, but something flickered in Rachel's expression that made Emily's stomach clench. "Actually, darling, that's where things get interesting," Rachel said, pulling an expensive leather folder from her handbag. "In all the chaos following your accident, certain legal formalities were overlooked." Lily Parker appeared in the doorway, face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wells." She insisted she had legal rights. "It's fine, Lily," Nathan said quietly, though his jaw was clenched. "Let her say whatever she came to say." Rachel's smile widened as she pulled out official documents. "Our divorce was never finalized, Nathan. The papers were filed, yes, but required both signatures for the final decree. When you had your accident before we could complete the process, legally speaking, we're still married." The words hit Emily like physical blows. Married. Still married. The man she had fallen in love with, given her heart to completely, belonged to someone else. Someone looking at her now with deliberate cruelty. "That's impossible," Nathan said, voice gaining fury. "The lawyers said." "The lawyers said many things," Rachel interrupted smoothly. "But I am still legally and officially Mrs. Nathan Wells, which means I have rights regarding your medical care, business decisions, and financial assets." Emily felt walls closing in. She tried to pull her hand free, but Nathan's grip tightened, eyes never leaving Rachel's face. "What do you want?" Nathan asked, voice dangerous and low. "What I've always wanted, darling. My fair share." Rachel's mask slipped momentarily, revealing the calculating predator beneath polished exterior. "You've had 8 months to think about our marriage, about mistakes we both made. I'm hoping that near-death experience gave you perspective on what's really important." "It did," Nathan said, voice growing stronger. "It showed me exactly what real love looks like, and it has nothing to do with you." Rachel's gaze flicked to Emily with undisguised contempt. How sweet. The rich patient falls for his devoted nurse. How predictable. She turned back to Nathan, voice hardening. "But sentimentality doesn't change the law, Nathan. I have rights, and I intend to exercise them." Emily finally found her voice. "Nathan, is this true? Are you still married to her?" The pain in her voice galvanized Nathan into action. He struggled to sit straighter, eyes blazing with fury that transformed his demeanor. "Emily, listen to me." "How touching," Rachel interrupted with cold laughter. "But personal feelings are irrelevant here. Nathan, I've contacted Marcus Reed about our situation. He's reviewing the legal implications as we speak." As if summoned, Marcus Reed appeared in the doorway, usually immaculate appearance disheveled, face grim. He clutched thick legal documents and wore the expression of someone bearing terrible news. "Nathan," Marcus said, voice heavy with regret. "We need to talk." "Talk here," Nathan commanded, hand still gripping Emily's. "I want Emily to hear whatever you have to say." Marcus glanced at Rachel, who nodded graciously, as if granting permission. "The divorce decree was never entered into court record," he said quietly. "Due to your incapacitation, the process was suspended indefinitely. Legally, your marriage to Rachel is still valid." Emily felt her last hope crumble. She finally succeeded in pulling her hand free, ignoring Nathan's desperate attempt to hold on. "I should go," she said, voice hollow. "This is a family matter." "No," Nathan said fiercely, trying to get out of bed despite his weakness. "Emily, don't you dare leave. This doesn't change anything between us." "Doesn't it?" Rachel asked with mock concern. "Nathan, darling, adultery is still a crime in some states. And given your recent medical challenges, questions about your competency could be raised, questions that might affect your ability to make decisions about your business, your assets, your care." The threat hung like poison. Emily understood immediately. If Nathan continued their relationship, Rachel could use it as evidence he wasn't mentally competent, potentially giving her control over his entire life. "You're despicable," Nathan snarled, entire body shaking with rage. "You left me. You walked out the night before the accident and said you never wanted to see me again." "I was emotional," Rachel replied with a shrug, though something flickered in her eyes, perhaps a shadow of genuine regret before the mask returned. "People say things they don't mean when upset. The important thing is I'm here now, ready to honor our vows, for better or worse, in sickness and in health." Emily watched with growing horror, finally understanding the full scope of what they faced. This wasn't just about love or money. It was about power, control, and systematic destruction of everything she and Nathan had built. "There has to be something we can do," Emily said desperately to Marcus. Marcus's expression was sympathetic, but grim. A competency hearing could resolve the marriage issue, but it would be lengthy, and if Nathan were declared incompetent, even temporarily, Rachel would have legal control over everything. Nathan finished, voice hollow. "My company, my assets, my medical decisions, she could have you barred from seeing me." Rachel's smile was triumphant. Finally, someone who understands. "Now, Nathan, I think it's time we discussed our reconciliation. Perhaps somewhere more private." "Get out," Nathan said, voice deadly quiet. "Get out of this room, this hospital, and my life." "I'm afraid that's not possible, darling," Rachel replied smoothly. "After all, I am your wife. I have every right to be here." She moved toward the chair where Emily had spent countless nights keeping vigil, the symbolism clear. Rachel was claiming territory, marking possession, making it clear she intended to erase every trace of love that had flourished in this space. "If you touch that chair," Nathan said, voice cold enough to freeze fire, "I will have security escort you out in handcuffs." "You could try," Rachel said, settling into the chair anyway. "But I think you'll find that being legally married gives me certain privileges your little nurse friend doesn't enjoy." The casual cruelty snapped something inside Nathan. Despite his weakness, he managed to swing his legs over the bed, entire body radiating protective fury. "Don't you ever," he said, voice shaking with controlled rage, "speak about Emily that way again. She is worth 1,000 of you. And if you think for 1 second I'm going to let you destroy what we have." "What you have is illegal," Rachel interrupted coldly. "What you have is fantasy built on medical dependency and misplaced gratitude. What you have is over." Emily felt something break inside her chest, not her heart, which was already broken, but something deeper. Her faith in happy endings, perhaps, or her belief that love could conquer all. "I need some air," she said quietly, moving toward the door. "I need to think." "Emily, please," Nathan called after her, voice breaking on her name. "Don't let her win. Don't let her take you away from me." Emily paused in the doorway, looking back at the man who had become her world. He was pale and shaking, trying to stand despite weakness, reaching for her across a distance that suddenly felt infinite. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "I just need a moment." As she fled down the corridor, Rachel's triumphant laughter echoed behind her, the sound like breaking glass in the sanctuary where love had once bloomed. For the first time since Nathan had spoken her name in that miraculous dawn, Emily wondered if some miracles were too good to last, if some love stories were destined to end before they truly began. But even as doubt consumed her, even as fear whispered that Rachel might be right. One truth remained: she loved Nathan Wells with every fiber of her being. And that love, no matter what legal documents said, no matter what battles lay ahead, was real, pure, and worth fighting for. Chapter 7: Fighting for Forever. The courtroom had witnessed 1,000 legal battles, but never had its marble walls heard a nurse testify that love could literally raise the dead until Emily Carter took the stand to fight for her soulmate. 3 weeks after Rachel's devastating reappearance, the courthouse buzzed with scandalous energy. The case had captured the city's attention. A tech millionaire, a devoted nurse, and a wife returning from the grave to claim her fortune. The gallery packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and hospital staff who had witnessed Nathan's miraculous recovery. Emily sat behind the defendant's table, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She wore her best navy dress, chosen by Ava, and had spent the morning fighting tears as she watched Nathan struggle with weakness that had returned under the stress of legal battle. The fight had taken its toll. His nightmares had returned with vengeance, and physical therapy progress had stalled as anxiety consumed his energy. But despite tremors and shadows under his eyes, Nathan insisted on attending every hearing, every moment of their fight for the future. "All rise for the Honorable Judge, Margaret Chen," the bailiff announced. Judge Chen was silver-haired and severe, with eyes that missed nothing and a reputation for cutting through legal nonsense with surgical precision. She had reportedly once told a lying witness that perjury was an insult to her intelligence. "We are here for Vaughn versus Wells," Judge Chen said, voice carrying through the hushed courtroom, specifically addressing Mrs. Rachel Vaughn's petition questioning the mental competency of her husband, Nathan Wells, and seeking conservatorship over his person and estate. Emily's heart constricted as formal language reduced their love story to legal terminology. Beside Nathan, Marcus Reed looked confident but tense, usually perfect hair disheveled from morning preparation. Across the aisle, Rachel sat beside Victoria Sharp, a shark-like attorney with a reputation for destroying witnesses clinically. Rachel had dressed for war in expensive black that managed to look both grieving and predatory. "Miss Sharp," Judge Chen said, "your opening statement." Victoria Sharp rose with predatory grace, smile cold and calculating. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about protecting a vulnerable man from decisions that could destroy everything he's worked his life to build." Emily bit her lip to keep from crying out as Sharp painted Nathan as a confused invalid manipulated by an opportunistic nurse. According to Sharp's narrative, Nathan's infatuation with Emily was textbook transference, a psychological phenomenon where patients developed romantic feelings for caregivers due to trauma and dependency. "The evidence will show," Sharp continued, gaining momentum, "that Mr. Wells's judgment has been severely compromised by brain injury, that he is making decisions based on medical dependency rather than rational thought, that he needs protection from those who would exploit his vulnerable state." When Sharp sat down, Marcus Reed rose to present Nathan's defense. His opening was passionate and eloquent, painting a picture of a man who had found true love through his darkest period, whose recovery had been accelerated by that love, and whose mental faculties were sharper than ever. "You will hear testimony," Marcus said, voice ringing with conviction, proving Mr. Wells's cognitive function is completely normal, that his relationship with Miss Carter is based on genuine affection and shared values, not medical dependency. And you will learn that Mrs. Vaughn's concern is motivated not by love, but by greed. The first day consisted of medical experts, neurologists, and psychiatrists who testified to Nathan's mental competency. Dr. Clara Hughes provided compelling evidence that Nathan's cognitive function was not only intact but had improved dramatically since awakening. But real drama began on the second day when Victoria Sharp called Rachel to the stand. Rachel played her role to perfection. The concerned wife devastated by her husband's accident, who had spent months hoping for his recovery, now worried about his ability to make sound decisions. She spoke with perfect emotion, voice breaking at precisely the right moments. "He's not the same man I married," Rachel said, dabbing her eyes. "The Nathan I knew was focused, driven, practical. This man seems lost in romantic fantasies, making decisions based on emotion rather than logic." "And your opinion of his relationship with Miss Carter?" Sharp asked. I think she's a lovely woman who did an admirable job caring for my husband, Rachel replied with calculated magnanimity. But I believe Nathan has confused gratitude with love, dependency with affection. He needs time to heal, to remember who he was without outside influences clouding his judgment. Marcus's cross-examination was brutal but effective. He methodically dismantled Rachel's portrayal of their marriage, revealing fights, separation, and, most damaging, her affair with her personal trainer, ongoing for months before Nathan's accident. Isn't it true, Mrs. Vaughn, that you told your husband the night before his accident that you were leaving him? Marcus asked. We had an argument, Rachel admitted, composure slipping. Married couples fight. Isn't it true you told him you had been seeing another man? I was emotional. Isn't it true you cleaned out your joint bank account and moved out before his accident? I needed space. And isn't it true you only returned when you learned he had regained consciousness? I came back because I love my husband, Rachel snapped, mask finally slipping. The courtroom erupted. Judge Chen gavelled for order. Marcus had made his point. Rachel's concern was financial, not emotional. But the turning point came on the third day when Emily took the stand. She had barely slept, terrified of saying the wrong thing. But as she placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, a strange calm descended over her. State your name for the record, Marcus said gently. Emily Carter. Your profession? Registered nurse specializing in neurological care and coma patients. Marcus walked her through credentials, experience, and assignment to Nathan's case. But when he reached the heart of her testimony, her relationship with Nathan, Emily's voice grew stronger. I fell in love with Nathan Wells long before he woke up, she said, voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. I fell in love with his peaceful face, his gentle spirit, and the way he seemed to be fighting to come back to life. I talked to him every night for 8 months, believing that somewhere in that darkness he could hear me. And when he awakened, what was his condition? Miraculous, Emily replied without hesitation. His cognitive function was perfect. He remembered conversations I'd had with him during his coma, music I'd played, stories I'd told. He woke up knowing my name, knowing who I was, knowing he cared about me. Victoria Sharp's cross-examination was vicious. She attacked Emily's credibility, motivations, and professional ethics. She suggested Emily had violated patient boundaries, taken advantage of a vulnerable man, that her feelings were based on some misguided savior complex. Isn't it true, Miss Carter, that you specifically requested assignment to Mr. Wells' case? Sharp asked, voice dripping insinuation. Yes, Emily replied honestly. I felt drawn to help him. Drawn to help a millionaire patient rather than indigent patients in the general ward. Drawn to help a man who seemed to be fighting to live, Emily corrected firmly. Income had nothing to do with it. Isn't it true you hope to benefit financially from your relationship? No, Emily said, voice rising with indignation. I never asked Nathan for anything except the chance to love him. Love him or love his bank account? Objection, Marcus called, but Emily was already answering. I loved him when he couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't give me anything but the privilege of caring for him.